Hi, everybody out there in Facebook land and wherever else we're posting this, probably on YouTube soon, since I'm becoming more technically adept and less clumsy at that kind of thing. Welcome to Keep the Ghost Light On by the Sherman Players. I am Steve Stott, president of the Sherman Players, and I'm joined by my co-host Robin Frome. Say hi, Robin. Oh, there we go, Robin. It's another chin. He did a chin wave last week. I was expecting
I'm running out of things. I'm running out.
Well, I was expecting something a little more unique than that, but there we go. Two in a row, but you can't get the help anyway.
Yeah.
Right, so we've got some great guests tonight. We have Ellie, Valerie, Al, and David, and we'll be introducing them shortly and working through some chat with them. So, right, what do we know? What do we know this week? Again, what we're hearing is that there is some movement as far as performance and some news. I did hear in the UK that the musical Six, that is about the yes, Ellie's clapping there, which is about Henry VIII's wives, not Henry VI's 8 wives, Henry VIII's 6 wives, is looking like it will be opening up in a socially distanced capacity very early in the new year on the West End. So as one show goes, we ought to see others come along with that. I don't think that news has really got anything to do with the vaccine announcement, even though the vaccine in the UK is due to start being administered this week.
Yes.
I think there'll be a lag before that really has any kind of major impact, but it's all good news. We have been hearing a little bit over here of theatres, certainly, which are beginning to close down. I think they've got to the limit of what they can do and how they can survive. Maybe more news on that will come out over the next few weeks. So that's quite sad. Not entirely unexpected, but we shall see how that goes. The other news, which I think most people would have heard, Warner Brothers have decided to plan to release the slate of 2021 movies on HBO Max simultaneously with releasing them in theatres. That's interesting because that was something that people suspected way back in the early days after the lockdown when cinemas closed down, that the studios might realise that there was a viable market for going straight to streaming. So whether that's the case or whether this is a pragmatic business move to see them through, the immediate future, or whether it's even testing the water to see, does this model actually work? My view is that if you want to go and see a movie in a movie theatre because it's that type of spectacle, you will still want to go and see it at the movies. So whether it affects the diehard moviegoers is to be seen. What we may well see is that the larger movie house chains suffer more from this, whereas the sort of boutique small theatres may well benefit as people who want to go and see movies go to those locations. So we'll see. That may, again, please our friend Dan Friedman, who was on a number of weeks ago, who runs the Bedford Playhouse. Okay, that's all I've got for news. Don't want to go on too much, but I do actually want to do a little plug for the Sherman Players. We are about to put out our holiday offering, which unsurprisingly, I think people will hear is A Christmas Carol. That does seem to be the show of choice for a lot of places. We are putting that out as an audio story over 12 nights. So the 12 Days of Christmas Carol. I didn't think of that. That was Matt Austin, so I get no blame for that title. But we are starting to put that out on the 12th. So we've been recording that over the weekend. with some fine local actors who are very well known in this region. So look out for that. Again, we'll be putting that out on Facebook, and again probably putting that out on other medium as well, and that will be an audio production. So that's the ad out of the way. Let's move on to the show. So I'm going to hand over to Robin to introduce our first guest. Robin.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Our guests are fantastic again for tonight, and I really appreciate everybody putting their time into this. We're going to start with two ladies that know each other. I actually got their information from Lynn Nissenbaum's daughter, Abby Nissenbaum, who I believe is involved in their newest performance production called The Flame, which they'll talk about. I worked with Abby on a few things when she was younger. She's still young, a little younger. And she hooked up, asked me to get The Flame out there, as it were, to have people get interested in being a part of it, which is great. And then I said, can these people be on and she said, let me ask them, and they're here. So that's great. We're going to start with Valerie, who is apparently in a fantastic voiceover for a couple games she'll talk about. And that's, I believe, our first VO for games that we've had, Steve, I think. Yeah, and the closest we had was a murder mystery. So Valerie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. Great to see everybody. So Valerie, if you could just give us the Reader's Digest version of your resume, because you can't be here all night, and then go into what's going on now, and the production you're working on, and how that and other things that you may be having in the hopper may be affected by the pandemic one way or the other. We've had a lot of people have some positive experiences since March, and a lot of people with not so positive experiences since March. And it depended on, where they were and what jobs they had. So it's been a various amount of different disciplines, from the theater, from performing arts, film, everything underneath that. So go ahead.
Wonderful. Okay, so a lot to cover then. Okay. Well, I started in theater. I started acting in theater when I was 7, and then I started doing equity regional theater around like all of Southern California, a lot in Los Angeles. And I just grew up loving that so much. I went to Orange County High School of the Arts, musical theater department, so I sang. And then when I was around 15 years old, I decided to leave OSHA, go do online high school, and just start performing professionally. And that was when I got my first agent. I started doing film and television. And then out of the blue, I somehow fell into voiceover. I started doing foreign dubs. So I would dub like Dutch or Swedish or Japanese films and TV shows into English. And then it just slowly kind of snowballed out of nowhere. It was one of those odd things where you say yes to one person and then they like you enough to refer you to the next person, and it just kind of snowballs from there. And I booked what I thought was a really tiny video game in 2016 called What Remains of Edith Finch. I thought it was going to be really tiny for like your phone, and it ended up being a BAFTA winning, ginormous, critically acclaimed video game. I got a nomination for Best Actress for the BAFTAs, and I have been working in games ever since. I do animation as well. I was in an anime called Tower of God this year. That was one of Crunchyroll's originals. Yeah, and it's just been some very exciting projects. And I think the biggest thing that has been interesting was this year with COVID, I had to learn to become my own audio engineer, because I've spent the last 6 years in voiceover going to studios. And then all of a sudden, when all of our studios were closed, I was in the middle of recording Tower of God. And they basically told us, like, you need to set up a studio or we have to recast you. So I I actually kind of look at it as a positive because, well, A, I have all these skills now that I never thought I could do, and B, it was one of those things where you kind of learn your own resiliency because I never thought I could learn how to mix and export and pick a better microphone to use than my regular audition studio. So that's been really exciting. But the thing that I think has been that was lacking for me during quarantine was my theater career and doing film and TV and doing pieces that because when in voiceover you obviously it is collaborative but not as much as being on stage or on camera where you're working in the room with a bunch of other actors. So I was really craving like a creative group to be working with and creating something that I felt like was partially mine. And then I had actually been a guest on Ellie and her co-host Lee's podcast called Les Hangout last year to talk about a video game I had done. And out of the blue in April, they reached out to me and they were like, hi, we're producing a musical podcast. We have no idea how to do actor stuff. And it has just been a blast. In the same test of resiliency, I have learned how to call huge agents and haggle them for their actors' rates. So it's just been a learning curve. I think this is how I would sum up 2020. Lots of highs, lots of lows, but the overarching theme has definitely been like, you have so much more to learn.
I mean, so explain
carry on, Robbie.
How's that being done? Is it being done virtually, or how's that being done? And what's the plot?
Oh, wonderful. Yes. Okay. So it's an LGBTQ musical about a young woman named Jamie who owns this bar called The Flame. And the owner of the owner of the building's daughter comes into town after her father's death, and she doesn't want to deal with the building. And she tries to sell the bar, but sparks fly between the two women and havoc ensues. And it's a delightful romantic comedy. The music is fantastic. We are doing it. It is going to be very akin to an old-timey radio play. We're going to be releasing it in 8 episodes via Spotify and iTunes. But we had our first table read last night because we wanted to make sure that again, voiceover can be very isolating when you don't work with other actors. So we really wanted to make sure that we brought all of our actors together and all of our creative team for at least one day. So we had an amazing Zoom call table read last night, which was so excited. We have Tony nominee Jen Colella in it. We have her girlfriend, Shalina Kennedy. We have an amazing cast.
And Shalina also is a Broadway star in her own right.
Yes.
Yes. She played Carole King in Beautiful for a very long time on Broadway.
Wow.
Yes.
So we have the cast is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you both look quite surprised that you've got a cast that's so amazing. You look like you're still in awe of that fact that you've got that cast.
We are, because it started out as just like a piece of paper of dream casting, and we got really lucky that pretty much every single person we reached out to said yes immediately. So it's just been very exciting. It was last night. It was, and Ellie and I are both in the show as well. So it's just, we've been reading this script amongst ourselves and the rest of our creative team for months, and to hear it come to life by these people that we've been watching their YouTube videos and hearing their auditions for months is just, we're both still quite in shock from last night.
No, I mean, that's great, and especially it doesn't matter whether it's an original script, whether it's a script you've seen many times, done lots of other places. Once you actually hear the actors speak as a director, once you hear the actors speak, and you see what can happen, that's really, really exciting. It makes it all fresh again. So
exactly.
That sounds wonderful. I'm going to ask what might seem like a bit of an impertinent question, but would you say that your ability to land maybe a more high profile cast for what is your first production. How do you feel COVID has either played into that, or and I don't want to put you on the spot or put you down.
Of course.
But how do you think that's played into availability and things like that?
So I think it was, I actually think there were three things that went into play. First off, absolutely COVID. These are especially my friend Jasmine, who's a huge actress on like HBO and things like that. In a normal year, there's no way that we would have been able to fit into her schedule. Same thing with a lot of our cast. On top of that, Jasmine was one of the first people we were able to get because she's a close personal friend, and then having her name already attached, it made it easier to pitch to the other actors' agents. And then third of all, because it is a queer project, we specifically reached out to performers in the LGBTQ community, and so many of them jumped on the chance because so many of them are actors who are traditionally not cast as queer, or don't get to live out a fully fleshed out love story, let alone like a romantic comedy in a musical. So I think it was those three things that combined. Perfect storm.
Yes, and sometimes that happens, and certainly the connections that you make clearly, and I'm sure we'll hear this from the other guys as well. The connections that you made, Valerie, as you say, through the video game voiceovers, have continued to, your talent is there, but the connections have to be there as well to make these things happen.
Yeah.
So it's very exciting, and we've seen over really just every week we see that new creative endeavors are coming out. People that have been in the industry for decades are doing new things. So it's a perfect opportunity, absolutely perfect opportunity to step into what's a vacuum, and somewhere that does seem to be sparking creative creative opportunities. It's it's an exciting time.
We're very excited.
Yeah. So how long has had the show been under development from the initial idea?
Yeah, so I can probably jump in there because it's been in development since before we talked to Valerie, and I think that also has been a major component in us being able to move so quickly on it, because Lee's my co-host, we run a podcast called Let's Hang Out. We've done it for 4 years, and so even before COVID had hit, I'm a musical theater person, same as Valerie, like have been acting since I was 6 or 7. I'm a recording engineer. I am a music producer, and Lee writes music. So we've been talking about making this musical for a long time. And it made sense for us to do a podcast because it was something that we know how to do. So even before COVID, we had thought, okay, maybe we'll do this sort of concept kind of musical as a podcast. Hopefully, eventually we could get it staged. And then COVID hit, and that really felt like the time to act on what we had already started. So I would say we came up with the concept and the idea around last September.
Right.
And then we sort of put it on the back burner, focused on our show. And then in March, when everything started to get uncertain, we decided, you know what, this is the time, we're going to jump on this. And that's when we pulled Valerie in, because as you can see, she's very plugged into the voiceover world.
Yes.
She got us all of our SAG contracts. She's been handling all of the talking to agents, talking to actors. And that's been very, very helpful. But the actual production of it, like the concept and the idea for the story started a pretty long time ago. And then we pulled in Caitlin, who Valerie also recommended, who's an incredible screenwriter. So we pulled her in May. And then this entire summer, we've just been writing the script, writing the music. And then getting the cast together, and now it's finally really coming together, and we're planning for actual release in June. So it's been over a year since the conception before it will actually come out.
I mean, this moves on quite neatly to talking to you, Ellie. So don't go anywhere, Valerie. We'll definitely come back to you as the show goes on. But it moves us quite nicely over to chatting to Ellie. So we won't do a formal introduction. We won't have Robin do a formal introduction because we've kind of covered a lot of that. But Robin, do you have any questions to carry on with that?
Yeah, I do. And actually, I was gonna. I think it's better to talk to Ellie about this because Ellie, you're the producer of The Flame. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
The audio producer.
Okay. Well, I'm assuming it's very collaborative effort as you're talking about.
Yes.
And what I've noticed are when you're trying to raise money for this, you're trying to raise the funding. How did that go? And was that was there a problem where it had to be it's not a Zoom cast. Is it a podcast
it's going to be it's going to be a podcast. So we're doing recording sessions.
So it's audio
all
as opposed to any video.
Yeah, I want to make sure I got the right terminology. So did that make a difference in what funding you got? Because they may have given you more if it was going to be on stage and you had to wait for it, or did it matter if it was going to be a podcast or not?
Well, for sure, it's a cheaper production than a stage production.
Right.
Yes. Because we only need the actors for their specific sessions. And Valerie actually probably could talk a little bit more about this too, because she's the one who worked on a lot of the contracts. But in terms of the crowdfunding, I think it was difficult to raise the money because, of course, a lot of people are financially impacted right now.
Mm-hmm.
We did a crowdfunding campaign for $26,000 for the entire production. We're hoping we can still get more sponsors. We can still make some additional on top of that, but that covers all of our actors. That covers actually making the show itself. And it was a very long, difficult process.
Yeah.
We spent 2 months crowdfunding, reaching out to every person that we know. We got Abby involved, who we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
We have a few associate producers who were helping us just push it out there.
How did you get together with Abby, just to tie that in?
Yeah, so that's definitely Valerie knows Abby pretty well.
Yes, okay. So Abby followed me originally because she played one of the games I was in. And then she, I know, has worked in games. So I followed her back, and we've just been following each other on Twitter for months. And then about midway through our campaign, I was sharing it. We had an issue with Twitter. Twitter would not run our ads because we used the term LGBTQ in them. And Abby jumped on that, our little soapbox to help out and get the word out. So then we brought her onto the team because I just thought she was delightful and really passionate.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, it's contacts, isn't it? It's all these little contacts. And we heard last week about how right now the fact that you have to work remote is actually, for some, is actually increasing that number of contacts in the way that Valerie, you said you are now you're now working as sort of casting director, agent, liaison, sound engineer, mixer, and all these other things. You're broadening that sort of web. And
our writer Caitlin. Yeah. Our writer Caitlin, who is someone who had hired me in January for a film she'd written. So, and then I loved her so much, I had to have her hired on this. So it's very true. It does just keep going. And then Caitlin has now brought on a financial liaison that she went to school with for us. So it's just
this is, and I think Robin, you'd agree with this. You know, the collaborative nature of creating art and creating performance is one of the great things about about
Yes.
being involved in this type of thing in the first place. And the fact that you can leverage that, or the fact that that is the nature of the way that this works, the fact that that's the nature of the way that this works actually helps with this kind of socially distanced arrangement. Because arguably,
can I just do a follow-up?
Arguably, if arguably this is a podcast, then it's socially distanced by definition.
Right.
So go ahead, Robin.
Okay, I just had a follow-up question real quick for Ellie and for Valerie, whoever wants to answer this. So you had this it's called crowdfunding, and you said because of the pandemic, people aren't giving as much. Did they tell you that personally, or were you trying to go for corporations that were hit hard by COVID, or would they have given more money if there was no COVID?
So we split it into two. We are hitting corporations for sponsorships once we have our pilot done, so that we are having them actual content to show them. So we were mostly hitting family, friends. I think
like any sort of social media, because especially with the podcast Let's Hang Out, we have a pretty good following, so we have a lot of the people who listen to the podcast who donated. I would say the average amount that people gave was around $50, so we're getting pretty, I mean, $50 is still a lot, but we're not looking at huge donations. We're looking at a lot of people who gave what they could.
There's no angel swooping in to say I'll cover the lot.
Yes, we did have one larger donor, but really only one, and most of it really came from our community, which I think is really amazing. Like, just the people close to us.
It's interesting about how I know a few people. I think Steve knows a few people that have actually made, I hate to say this, but have made money in certain industries. Like the Lysol people, or stuff like that. They're making, and the realtors in Connecticut, for example, have been making hand over fist, and you kind of think, well, I'll hit the realtors or something like that. But I guess these are corporations that are they city based, or are they nationally based?
What do you mean? Sorry.
Well, the corporations that you were asking.
Oh, that we're reaching out to.
Yeah, we're reaching out to.
Yeah, so we haven't done too much heavy corporation outreach.
Oh, you haven't? Okay.
Yeah, so it's really just person to person right now.
So
and from person to person, I think we had 320 people who donated. And they're just people who believe in the project, people who want to see the project.
Right. So it's a real community effort.
Yes.
Real community effort.
Really.
Awesome.
Yeah. No, I was approached by Abby. I got the email from Abby. I know a couple of people that we know were approached. I mean, what I'd like to say is that as sort of president of a playhouse, I applaud anybody who's trying to create anything anytime, generally, and certainly what you're doing seems to be very unique and very, very timely, very timely. I watched The Happiest Season on Netflix or wherever it was the other day, and that's obviously getting a lot of press because it's supposedly the first LGBT romantic comedy. I'm sure it isn't, but it's maybe the first holiday romantic comedy of that type. I don't know, but again, I think you're at exactly the right point to to take that journey. And
the audience is definitely there. The LGBTQ community is very fiercely. They will watch if you give them content that represents them. They will watch it. They might not like it, but they will watch it.
I think there's certainly an opportunity to go well beyond that. Tapping into musical theatre anyway. You've got an audience though who are hungry for new stuff in the first place. So you know, no matter what part of society they come from. So you know, I'd like to sort of offer sort of our help from the Showman players as far as we can sort of refer links and keep some of that that buzz going as well.
Thank
You know,
you.
since Abby is an alumni and she's been on our stage a few times, and her mom Lynn is a board member. You know, you know, that's the perfect link, another connection.
Yes,
So
we really appreciate that.
yeah,
Thank you
we'd
so
like to be able
much.
to help with putting a bit of information out there. So I think it's probably time to move on to our next guest. So don't go anywhere. Shuffle up that coach, and Robin, over to you.
Yep. So we're going to talk to Al. I hope I do this name right. Al Pour Issa, how are you?
Hi, I'm very well. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. And these are all new faces to me, but I really appreciate your support in coming out for us. I really appreciate that. I think I said to you on a text that we finally got a dramaturg. Yay! Because I love the dramaturg in everybody, as it were. So Al, give us again the Reader's Digest version of your large resume and how the pandemic has affected you.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for inviting me. It's wonderful that you created such community. Regarding, you said, you know, dramaturg. I mean, I actually, when I heard about dramaturgy, I was in Tehran, and that discipline didn't exist in Iran. It still doesn't.
Right. Right.
And so I studied scenic design for my undergrad, and then I studied dramatic literature for my MA. And then while I was studying, during my university, I was studying plays. I come across this term, and nobody at my university didn't know about that. Only a professor talked that, no, I think the definition is this and that. And even they didn't know about the real, definition and work territories and what are the jobs that a person who studied dramaturgy would do. So I was so fascinated by that concept. And so when I left Iran to London, I was studying English there. I applied to, I was basically, the reason that I got to Yale School of Drama was that I was studying plays, and I translated Maria Artin Fornes's plays while I was in Tehran. And, you know, she's a wonderful playwright. She's a Cuban American, part of LGBTQ, as you were talking about. It's interesting that I wanted to voice basically feminism in Iran, that Iranian women's right is not really being recognized. It still hasn't been. And I was doing that I come across the books of some of the faculty members at Yale that worked on her plays. So that was the link that I came to America, studied at the Yale School of Drama. I did my MFA in dramaturgy, and then I returned back to Tehran, and mainly I started teaching dramaturgy. So I wanted to introduce dramaturgy to Iranian communities. And however, I couldn't work as a dramaturg in Iran. I mainly worked as literary manager, kind of judge plays and scripts. So during that time, I turned to film, and that because Iran had a large community of filmmakers and has a history of filmmaking in Iran. So I started making films. So the shift from theater to film was, for me, was career-wise, not pandemic. And now I know that, you know, many theater makers started making online content, but I started making them for my for my career, because I couldn't make theater, couldn't make plays that I wanted to do in Tehran. So I started making short films and documentary films. And that was the reason that I basically become screenwriter, producer, and director in film. And then when I returned back here, I started teaching at the same time, working as a reader. And now currently I'm reading plays for Yale Drama Series under supervision of Ms. Paula Vogel. Also, I'm teaching at New York Film Academy, in film department and also acting department.
And how is that? Is everything you're doing remote at the moment, or are you actually on site for any of this?
There's a class called Acting for Film 4 that I supervise my students to write their scripts under my supervision, and then they act in their own script and I direct the plays, basically scripts. They're short scripts that they write up to 3 to 4 minutes. So all the rehearsal and written are being done remotely through Zoom, but we created basically the chair of the department with other chairs, LA, New York, and South Beach, Florida. They work together and they created a protocol, and that's also is in consistency with the other protocols that have been created with SAG and director's guilds and producer's guilds. So they learn and created that document, and I'm following that. Actually, I shot 6 shoot dates, and there's only 1 left, which is scheduled in 2 weeks. So we that was really interesting. That I actually felt that it's very doable. Keeping distance. Only actors, when they have to do the scene, they take off their mask and they do it, and they shot it. Other than that, all the classes that I've taught and have been teaching turned to online, and I actually enjoying it. It's even I'm more become more expert in putting out the videos, because in film my classes are heavily visual, and I show pictures and short videos, and it's really a great platform. I really like Zoom, and
this is encouraging, because and Robin, we've seen this, that we've had a lot of theatre educators on. Not so much film, but certainly a lot of theatre educators, and it's been quite a leap for them to move to Zoom. And they've, on the whole, as I mentioned earlier, they've adapted and found that they can be creative in that way. But it's very interesting to hear that it sounds as though you're almost finding it ideal, an ideal way to work.
I found it ideal for theoretical courses, but for rehearsal, it was not easy. Actually, when I had the rehearsals at the campus at the beginning, I felt that the sound was not really well, so we turned it to Zoom, and Zoom became more doable than streaming on campus. So that was very. I actually like Zoom because you don't have to commute.
Yeah, we've heard that one before as well. Yeah,
we have,
and it's time saving and faster, and and also regarding my expertise as a reader, basically I as a leader manager who basically reads plays, it's ideal for me. Just they send the scripts. I judged 2 international festivals during the COVID. Actually, it was called COVID International Film Festival. Another was Made at Home Film Festival, and also it was again the plays was almost 160 plays that they sent me. So I've been busy reading plays, so it didn't really affect me because of that work territory that I had to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. So Robin.
Yeah, so are you able to comment on how, Yale Drama is up there as one of the pinnacles of all acting schools, and for writing and everything like that has to do with theater. How are they faring with this pandemic? Is it just, guns ahead, they're doing great, same people, same story?
it seems that they're doing many of the classes online and hybrid. I really didn't follow news. I mainly were, following New York Film Academy where I'm teaching. I really didn't follow their protocols. I have no.
And how the Film Academy, how is this affecting sort of graduation from the Film Academy for the students? Is it holding them back? Is it taking them longer to get through the course, or is it still moving ahead at the same pace?
I believe that it's they're moving at the same pace, but probably the chairs of the department could talk about that about the rate of registration and enrollments. Probably I can say that there was a decrease a little bit, but overall they got, I as an instructor, I have my classes. I usually teach 3 to 5 classes, and it's interestingly, I taught in summer too, because summer was usually was difficult to get classes, but actually I got classes, and
Wow.
it was good for me because I mainly taught theoretical classes. It actually hit acting department severely that much, but I think that they really put up the protocols, and that was really helpful, and it was really great. They did a great job. And for me, I mainly work as a as a leader manager. So in that regard, that was really helpful.
That's great to hear.
Yeah. Al, have you come across any interesting, like something that really pops out, scripts that they have sent to Yale that have to do with COVID? Are there anybody writing about that these days?
Not necessarily COVID, but I read some interesting plays about race, and that was really interesting. And they reflected on current time, like gun violence, and also Black and also other ethnic groups. I really like those plays. They were very strong. How
about political?
Yeah, the political. There are some good political plays that I really enjoy.
I think it will be interesting to see
Yeah.
When the gates open and these types of things can actually be produced. It'll be interesting to see how much the movements that were going on before COVID hit, what the impact has been on those movements, and certainly those movements in the arts. We were looking at, as you mentioned, the sort of Black Lives Matter and the Black interests, the notions of immigration, the diversity, inclusion, and rights. Things were reaching a bubbling point before COVID hit, and clearly still more protests, still more activity going on, but maybe less visibility. So it'd be interesting to see how that translates in the arts, and whether or not some of the issues that the arts were facing as far as inclusion and progression, whether those have taken a step back, whether they pick up from where they were, or even have developed better, and also some of these subjects and the social movements have gone. That'll be really interesting. Well, I have one more question. And you can answer this, Al, and Robin can leap in as well. For those who are watching us who don't know what a dramaturg is,
Yes,
can we have a definition of a dramaturg? Because it is a relatively new term in the broad arts. I mean, I only really became aware of the term of a dramaturg as a thing, as a person, as an activity, maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. It wasn't a term I'd come across before that. I've come to know what it means, but I'm pretty certain a lot of our viewers will still be unclear as to what this exotic dramaturg is. So a definition, if you please.
Dramaturgy is applied criticism that encompasses various aspects of theater, from literary management to play development to criticism, basically review writing, to production dramaturgy, meaning helping producers, directors, writers to shape their work, which also help the artistic team to create their season planning. So dramaturgy basically can be referred to, as I said, applied theory, and that's a short definition of that.
That's great, because my understanding has now been clarified. In my mind, dramaturgy was kind of a production dramaturgy, I suppose, and that to me that was making sense of the text in context. So, for example, Shakespeare, your dramaturg would be, in my mind, would be explaining the context of the text from a historical point of view, from a social point of view, and how it may relate to what's going on today. But it does sound as though, you know, that reaches out further than the production into all aspects of theatre.
That's true. That's a great definition that you mentioned. So it starts with text. The dramaturg will start analyzing the text and basically talk about the various aspects of the plays. But then they get involved with the production. He's a critical eye in the theater. So he's a critic or reviewer inside of the ensemble, assisting the director or producer, and also cast members, probably designers. If they wanted extra research, they wanted to ask questions, if they wanted to go to different directions, he would basically consult with the director and say, you want to go through this aesthetic, because he's so versed in various criticism and he knows about historical aspect of so many things. He basically give advice to various team members so that they can basically facilitate the process. So
that sounds, I mean, again, sounds fascinating. Typically, when I think of someone involved in the production who's a critic and knows how it should be done, typically that's one of the cast. But that's a whole other story. So thank you very much, Al. I think we'll move along. So again, you can shuffle down the coach. And Robin.
Yeah. So our last guest, speaker for tonight, is David Robson. Thank you so much, David, for joining us. I really appreciate it. If you could give us a snapshot of your large career in the theater, and then how the pandemic has affected you one way or the other.
Yeah, and thank you, Robin and Steve, for having me. It's great to be here. I grew up in Philadelphia. I live in Wilmington, Delaware now, and because our president-elect is from Wilmington, all the cameras are here all the time. Suddenly Wilmington is somebody. We're on the map. And
make a show.
Yeah. So I've lived here for quite a while. When I met my wife, moved down here. Always been interested in theater. My mom started taking me to plays when I was a kid and kind of caught the bug then. And then in the 1990s, I'd been writing up to that point, but in the 1990s, I kind of got serious about writing plays, started writing 10-minute plays, short pieces, etc., just to kind of get my feet wet, see what it was all about. to Al's point, you're kind of your own first dramaturg, right? When you're starting to write plays, like what works, what doesn't work. You share it with friends and they become your dramaturg. And, so, it was interesting to hear Al talk about that, because I guess there are informal dramaturgs, and then there are people, of course, like Al, who's a professional dramaturg. But anyway, so I've been writing plays since the 90s, and my first plays were produced either here in Wilmington or in Philadelphia, where I grew up, and still have a lot of theater connections in Philadelphia, some great theater there, and some awesome theaters have been nice enough to do a couple of my plays. What else? I was thinking today, because I know you're up in Connecticut and I'm here in Delaware, and I thought, have I had a play done in Connecticut? And I was thinking, yeah, I have. I had a play done in Hartford about 5 years ago. Theater Works Hartford did a production of mine, two-character play, which got some great reviews and some notoriety, small, in a modest way. And it's called Playing the Assassin, and it's two black men, and one of them is a former football player, and it's just two guys in a room, and it's about redemption, and it's about violence, as football is often, and it really did well. So it was great. That was the last time I think I was up in Connecticut. It was about 5 years ago when I went to see a production of the play. During COVID times, it's been kind of tricky, of course, as it has been for everybody. Kind of hunkered down here in my not my bachelor pad, my man cave, I guess, but it doesn't have a TV or anything, which I guess it should, right, if it's a man cave. But this is where I usually come to write, and it's been tricky. Like Al, I teach, and so I've been teaching from afar, and it has its challenges, no doubt about it. I teach English, I teach creative writing, I teach some film classes as well at a small college here nearby. And I've been writing, and a play that I've been working on that had its first public reading last night, was kind of, I guess, I don't know about everybody else here tonight, but, it's been kind of a depressing time in a whole bunch of ways. Family members who've had COVID, seeing what's happened, and how the country has suffered and how the world has suffered. And so I came back to this idea that I'd had quite a while ago. And I said, I'm going to write this play, because it was a comedy, and it was it was life affirming, hopefully not too sentimental. I try to stay away from the overly sentimental stuff. And it had its first reading last night. We had quite a few people watch it, and some great feedback. And it's a comedy based on a real person. And Steve, I know your British accent, so you may have heard of this person, but it's a play that takes place in the 1970s. I grew up in the 1970s, and it's about a young woman, a teenager, who is kind of desperate and out of sorts, and she ends up going to London from another part of England, searching for advice. And she's at that age where she's becoming interested in intimacy and sex and relationships. And so who does she go to? She goes to the guru of the time, a guy named Alex Comfort. And Alex Comfort famously wrote a book called The Joy of Sex.
Oh, right, yes.
Very popular in the 1970s.
I've heard about it.
I've
never seen it.
Heard about it.
I've never seen any of the pictures.
Right. Yeah. Sure, Steve. Yeah, it's all pictures. No, it's not. But so it's strangely enough, it turned out to be it's a sweet play. And she comes seeking advice, and of course her boyfriend shows up, and she's from the north of England, as is he, and it's
as am I,
as is my family.
Yeah.
It's fun, and so I tend to write a lot of dramas. As my wife will say, I tend to be into the heavy stuff, but I've been trying to work on some comedies lately. Had a play that went up a couple of years ago that also streamed during the pandemic. It was produced 2 or 3 years ago, and then it was streamed by the same theater company, based in history, a farce. And it was the first time I'd ever tried to write a farce. And I realized how hard it is to write a farce, because all the pieces have to really fit very, very tight.
It's not all slamming doors and folding trousers. No.
Yeah, you can't let down your guard when you're writing a farce. So I'd set myself the challenge, and it was really fun to do. So those are some highlights, I suppose, of things that I've done.
So the just thinking about the writing that you're doing now, you have been doing now, and how that's been affected by COVID from two angles is what I'm really interested in. Is one is, you know, your personal experiences, as you say, and this kind of harks back also. We had a guest on a few weeks ago, Martin Casella, who had family members who had been affected by COVID, and you know, he won't mind us saying that, you know, he was finding it very tough, the political situation, the social situation, and everything. Things that hark back to some of the things you say. So I'm interested in how that side has affected your writing in terms of the subject matter and the frequency of writing, but also how the isolation may have affected your ability to write. You know, again, we don't know enough about you to know whether you are a gregarious person who gets their inspiration from everything that goes on around them, or whether you're one of those writers that holds up for 6 months, never sees anybody, and just gets coffee and donuts put through the door. So just in both of that's a lot to take in, but it's really, you know, how have you been affected by COVID, and how have you been affected by the restrictions and isolation?
It's interesting because, you know, Al was saying that he enjoys, you know, being at home and he can do a lot of his work from home, and I agree with that up to a point. And you know, I have my introverted side, but I think, you know, I really miss teaching live, and sometimes I just want to be able to get up and go somewhere.
Yeah,
somebody's expecting me somewhere, and, you know, no, I haven't been expected anywhere in a long time, unless I'm meeting students and so forth. So that's been tricky. You know, I always have a few plays. I don't want to call it in a line, but I always have it kind of in my mind, some things that I've been thinking about, that I've been working on. You know, I take notes. You know, I've got a play now that I've just started writing, you know, that I tend to take notes and just jot down thoughts, you know, and try to flesh some of it out. I'm not the kind of writer who has a discipline where I can go in at, you know, 8 a.m. every day and work till 1 or 2 and then take a walk and so forth. I tend to work more erratically. And so when I have an idea, I kind of just pounce on it and I stay on it for a while, kind of like that dog and its bone, right? And I just won't let go. And that kind of drives me. Right now, I'm going to be doing some rewrites on the play that we did the reading of last night, because it's going to be produced likely later this year if the whole vaccine works out, or early the following year. So there's some things that I want to change and work on. So it's interesting because I've kind of got my pile of stuff that is new that I need to keep working on, like this play that I showed you the scrawlings from. Then I have revisions of things that I want to keep working on, or that I feel I need to, or a theater company wants to see another draft. And then, you know, I've got a couch behind me, so sometimes I'm like, I just need to sit down and think about my play for a while. And usually that means laying down and taking a nap, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So, you know, there are different phases of it. I read a lot. I do write a lot. You know, I've got my family around, so we try to give each other our space, because, you know, we're all kind of stuck together, so we don't want to drive each other too crazy. So we kind of have our time period in the day when we kind of, you know, eat dinner or that kind of thing. But in terms of the work, there's always something in my mental pipeline anyway, something I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting. And I tend to be attracted, as I mentioned, to sometimes darker stuff. Not always. A play of mine that hasn't been done yet, but it's had some great readings and there's been some interest in the play, is, I don't want to call it a Me Too play because that's a cliche, but it uses the backdrop of a famous person who's done something untoward, to say the least. And, you know, it's a play that I've been thinking about a lot and hoping it's produced once the whole COVID thing ends. So it's tricky, you know, it's the new stuff. it's the revision stuff, but it's also putting feelers out and saying, hey, here's my play. Can you read it? Are you interested in it? This is going to end eventually, and I hope we're all safe between now and then. But, you know, it's a real balancing act. So it's kind of having to do all of these things at one time. And so I try to compartmentalize a little bit.
I think Robin can probably sympathise somewhat with that. I mean, he's a guy that creates, and he's stuck at home. And I know that's quite a challenge for you, Robin, isn't it?
Try being married to me.
I was just going to say the same thing, Robin. What are you talking? Trying to be married to me?
The wives should get together, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, so, Robin, just
Yeah.
so we can compare notes, as it were. Are you finding now that your mind is turning to COVID or isolation as a subject matter?
I actually, sorry, is that
no, carry on. Yeah.
Okay. So I actually, you know, I've quoted her before, and Jessica Granger we had on, who wrote that piece for Vogue.
Yes.
And she was a screenwriter and a television writer. And I remember vividly, I remember a lot of things vividly about this show. So, you know, they stick with me. But one of the things that she said was her producers and everybody that she had to give scripts to said, don't you dare write anything about COVID, because no one wants to see it. No one wants to hear about it. Everybody's trying to escape, you know, and that you just better write some sort of, you know, fantasy type of thing, or not fantasy, but anything historical or something like that. And that stuck with me, because I think she's right, or they are right in that frame of mind. But I do feel that what I've been doing through this whole thing is I've been watching a lot of documentaries. I don't know if anybody else has, but a lot of great documentaries on people. I just watched one on Evil and Law today, and of course I want to write something about it. And then there's somebody else, or Dickensian one, I want to write about it, you know, that type of thing. So I've been inspired a lot, rather than always going to rehearsal and teaching or whatever I need to do, and working on one project, as you know how we do that. And then the only thing we think about is the next project. So we are taking a back seat to that next project idea. And unfortunately, you know, it's not economically gratifying, but we're going to have to do it. You know, we have to bite the bullet on that. So your
point is well taken, Robin, because, you know, it's been tricky, because, you know, I write comedies, I write dramas, but last night, after we did this reading of this play of mine, which is called Comfort and Joy, you know, this comedy, the artistic director said, you know, what I like about this play so much this year has been so brutal, that something that's got depth to it, but also something that is life affirming is a real joy. And that was why I wrote it, because I was feeling like I needed some of that. And it's weird, because I tend not to write to make myself feel better. I tend to write because I'm curious about something, or I want to have questions answered about something. And so through the process of writing, I'm able to do that. But this was different. Yeah.
That's not to say that, you know, down the pike, it may be an incredibly interesting thing to put out there 5 years from now. For example, 9/11, nobody touched it for a long time.
Yeah.
And then this play came out that they did at the Playhouse called The Guys.
Right.
Was just two people about that experience, and it was beautifully done. But still, 5 years later, not a big audience. You know, it's sort of like you got to plan it. You know.
I have a weird personal story about this. Recently, another play of mine was to be streamed at the Blank Playhouse, the Blank Theater, which is in Los Angeles. And I'll explain what the play is about briefly in a second. But we realized that this was not exactly the right time to do it. A couple of years ago, when the Trump administration began, I started, you know, you write for a whole variety of reasons. And so I was kind of trying to write my way through this new administration. And I came up with this idea of writing a one-woman show about Melania Trump. And the play was to take place at her husband's funeral. Now, again, I started writing this about 2.5 years ago. And the Blank Theater finally got around to reading the play, and they liked it. And at the same time, life was going on. Our politics was going on. So I didn't want to make it a greatest hits kind of play in the sense of, okay, this is your life, Melania. I wanted it to be something a little deeper than that. And so it was supposed to go up in late October at the Blank. And then we had a discussion about it. And it was right around the time that the president contracted COVID. And we realized that the timing, for a whole bunch of reasons, wouldn't work. But the primary reason it wouldn't work was because anything we put out there related to the subject matter would be completely swamped by the reality of what was happening. And it's going to happen in March of next year. And I was kind of upset, not upset, that's too strong a word, but I was a little bummed out because we had a great actress who does a lot of voiceover work like Valerie does, and just very talented. And she does a very good Melania, not the caricature, but she makes her a real person, which to me is kind of what I was going for, because there's a real person in there somewhere. And so that bummed me out a little bit. But then I read something in the New Yorker that made me feel better, and I put it up here, and it said, it's reviewing a play related to Trump, but it says at the very end of it, what is said about him, meaning Trump, on stage will matter only if it can tell us something about ourselves. And that's really helped me with my Melania play, because it made me realize that in a way the play is not about her. You know, she's a mirror of some kind. She's a mirror for us, or a version of us, or some of us. And so when I realized that it wasn't really about her in the end, it made me feel better, and I'm looking forward to the reading in March.
No, that should be exciting, and I absolutely see what you mean about had it been any time directly before the election, then it's about the election. It's a political play, whether it's a political play or not. It becomes a political play, and if that's not your message, then I absolutely understand that. And it's interesting. I was reminded of Noel Coward writing Blithe's Spirit. And Blithe's Spirit, a wonderful play, one of my favourites, and you know, quintessentially Noel Coward. It was written at the height of the Blitz in the UK. The real dark time in the war. The theatres were closed, were getting bombed, the theatres in central London. Coward was at the height of his powers, and he had this wonderful society of people that he knew, and his friends, and a number of them were being killed, you know, in bombing raids, or they were off fighting in the war, and so a lot of darkness. He took himself off for a couple of weeks to a place called Port Merion in Wales, which, if anybody has seen The Prisoner from the 1960s, that's where that was filmed. And he stayed there for a couple of weeks. And while he was there, in 2 weeks, he wrote Blithe's Spirit. And what's really interesting about it is it's about death. It's a comedy about death. It's, you know, very early sort of dark comedy, done whimsically, but there is no mention of the war. There is no, it's set at the same time as the war. There's no mention of the war, no mention of conflict, no mention of anything to do with that. And it reminded me that, you know, yeah, if it's what people wanted to hear, what people wanted to see, something that took them away. But when you look beneath the surface, again, maybe this this relates to the dramaturgy conversation. When you look below the surface and you understand what was going on when it was written, it kind of makes sense that it was about, you know, ultimately it was about death and the afterlife, and what happens to people in that situation. So it really did bring that back to mind. It did bring that back to mind. I think have reached the end of our time. Every week we want to talk for hours and hours and hours, because I'd love to hear more about the Flame, and also about your podcast, Ellie, and the way that has worked and how that's going, and I'd love to talk more dramaturgy and the variety of things that Al, you've been involved in. And
Steve,
yes.
Steve, let's have him do a quick plug just for
yes,
for, websites and stuff like that. So Ellie, if you want to throw those out there.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to follow The Flame, the easiest way to do that is to follow all of our social media. It's The Flame Musical, but also you can follow Les Hangout Pod, where we have all kinds of stuff. So leshangoutpod.com has a section for The Flame as well.
Cool. And David, do you have something in the hopper?
Always something, but not until this whole thing blows over. But you can check my Instagram out. It's DJR Play, or at DGR Play, and you can find a link to my website. So
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome.
And I think we have a link. We've already posted, I think, a link on our website or our Facebook page to Al's website. So we'll make sure we point people to your website as well, Al, and keep that going. And Valerie, before we sort of break off, do you have anything more in the way of the voiceover stuff coming up? Do you have anything that people that should be interested in looking out for?
Yes, I do. I have a couple video games that aren't announced that will be coming out in the next couple months, and then I have I think I've recorded something like 10 audiobooks this year, and I have 2 coming out in December.
Wow.
Yeah, it's filled up a lot of my time, a lot of
Great.
sitting in the closet reading. So yeah, you can follow me. Everything's on my Instagram, which is at Valerie Rose Lohman.
Fantastic, because we really like people to be able to follow up on these shows. It's been wonderful, and I feel we could sit and chat to David for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And David, I'd be really interested to hear more about the plays that you've got coming up from the point of view of the Sherman Playhouse, and the stuff that we're going to look to do as well.
Awesome.
So
would love to send you. Would love to do that. That'd be great.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep in touch on that, and
That'd be wonderful.
stay in touch. So that's it. That's another Keep the Ghost Light On sort of done and in the can, or it will be once I've done a little bit of light editing on this, and we publish it out again onto Facebook. So really thank you to everybody who's been watching, and thank you to our guests, to Ellie and David and Valerie and Al. It's been lovely. Really
nice meeting everybody
tonight. So
Thank you for
Thank
having
you
us.
so
everybody.
much.
And,
Thank you.
And so really it's time, Robin, say good night, Robin.
Good night, Robin.
There we go. He's trying to put a little bit of variety in there. We do appreciate it.
Little George Burns.
Yeah, we do appreciate
Threw it
it.
in there.
Yeah. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you again next week, next Monday, 7:30, for another Keep the Ghost Light On. Good night.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.